Hello and what's up peeps, this is the Geek Artist back again with another video. Now after the success of my previous 10-part speed art series and the 10 sketches in 10 minutes compilation video, I received a lot of comments requesting me to make a detailed video on environment concept art process, the visual development techniques and my general thought process and how I approach compositions. So here it is guys, a simplified video to guide you through all that I do to create an environment concept art. Now remember, instead of focusing on what I do and how I do them, you should pay more attention to why I do them, the thought process and the reason behind doing them, and how they impact the scene. So let's do this. Alright, so as you can see I have taken two images on the right side. I recommend to have some references open, have an idea of what you might want to incorporate in the concept art that you want to create right now. For example, I've taken these two images that I've kept on the right side. It's a tree and an island, sort of a mountain that I might use in my concept art. Now the goal here is to use them but also go beyond the reference. Let your imagination do the trick. So I'm going to start off by painting a sky. Now next off I'm going to paint the sea with a sort of a sea green, bluish, darker tone. Now I'm going to focus on the tree. So I'm basically studying the tree right now. Instead of using the image directly, I'm studying it. So I'm going to start off with the base, then the light and the shadows. Now for the leaves. I like the pattern, it's kind of interesting. And now for the leaves towards the base of the tree. This is the foreground for my composition that I've thought of, and it's creating an interesting block because it sort of follows the rule of thirds because it's on the left side. It's not at the dead center or the right. So the goal here is to not draw attention towards the tree. The tree is in the foreground. It sort of creates a block that it guides the viewer's attention towards the background, which is where I'm focusing on now. The background, I'm painting the sea with a bit of a brighter green, the sea green, and now I'm going to study the mountain or that island rock. I'm going to roughly create the shape of that island, and then there might be some sand at the base. I can imagine some bounce slide, and maybe the island is going deep into the sea, so some areas visible from under the water that's more like a greenish or yellowish tone. And now I imagine some vegetation that's not in the reference, but I feel like it needs some of that. I'm going to change the color and keep some green there. And next up I'm going to polish the shape a bit, and now I'm going to cast some light, some really warm light. It's almost bleaching yellow light over there coming from the left side. And you've probably seen me talk about this, that when you're lighting a scene, don't just cast a light of a single tone. Use an intermediate color. Like there's something that happens in skin tones. It's called subsurface scattering, that the transition between light and shadow doesn't happen abruptly. There is a mid-tone. So that's what I'm going to use. It may not be fully realistic. This may not occur in inorganic objects like maybe the road or buildings, but it can happen for skin or even for leaves and vegetation. So I'm going to apply that, and in general it improves the way the visuals appear when you introduce more colors to your scene instead of keeping it very bland and monotonous like light and shadow. That's it, nothing in between. Try not to do that. Try to fill your scene with colors and variations of colors. So that's what I'm doing here. I can paint some backlight for the mountains, some rim, and it's an ambient light coming from the back. I'm trying to define the shape of the rocks a bit more to give it a bit more of a volume so that it carries some weight and not just a flat cutout kept right there. I'm going to bring it down a bit more to follow the rule of thirds a bit more towards the center, and as you can see I just painted the light that falls on the sea. So creating that beautiful rich color of greenish color, not mainly blue but green. You get the idea, like a place where the land is merging with the sea and the light falls in that specific area, causing a really bright and rich green patch of light. Cast some shadow for the rock that's falling on the right side, and I'm gonna make the sea in the back a little darker to create some contrast between this area that I'm focusing on with the warm light in the back. And now I'm gonna paint some distant, like faraway mountains in the background, like really far away, that you can see in depth, and a bit more another mountain a bit closer than that. I'm gonna try to merge the horizon area of the mountains. Now, as you can see, I'm sort of making the transition area a bit brighter, and now I'm casting some warm light to give that idea, that impression that there's a light source on the left side. And a bit of gradient, as you can see, that gradient coming in from the left side and hitting the scene. Again, talking about introducing colors, I introduced some more warm color onto the sky that was mainly like a dark bluish gray that looks like an overcast sky right now, like it's about to rain or the weather is really bad. Again, this is something I call stylized cinematic lighting, that you draw the viewer's attention towards a specific area by casting a light in that area. Treat it like a spotlight, like what you see on a stage, like how the spotlight is cast on the character to draw the attention towards that character. Similarly, I'm casting direct and warm light towards the area that I want people to notice, and I'm gonna make the mountain a bit lighter to give the impression that it's a bit far away in depth. So I'm gonna pick color from the sky and put it right on top of the mountain, so that the values are better, they're not too dark. So this is just to show you that the scene is more or less sticking to the rule of thirds right now. Now I feel like this warm area where our attention is going to deserve something, like let's say a pirate ship, and I'm gonna draw that right now. I'm not taking the references for the pirate ship, I'm trying to get it right, and I'm just trying to get it from my imagination, so it might not be really realistic, but yeah, I'm just getting the very roughly getting the shape of a pirate ship. I'm going to decrease the size just a little bit and cast some shadow on the right, and I'm going to mix the contact area to give the sense that it's grounded and that it's not just floating on the sand. A little bit of reflection on the water, the coastal area, and some bounce light because of all the warm light falling on the sand, creating a very strong bounce on the relatively dark colored blackish ship. Now I'm applying a color lookup. It is like Photoshop's filter, customizable filter. I made a separate video on this altogether, you can check it out. It gives you an idea of what your scene might look in different kinds of moods and settings. So I'm going to choose one that I think goes well. It enhances the scene in terms of the in terms of colors and contrast. It makes it slightly better. Now I'm trying to create a bit of depth in front of the ship. It looks a bit too dark for where it is right now, so I'm gonna pick the color of the sea, the greenish, and I'm gonna create a light sort of a bounce in front of it. Again, I'm introducing more colors. As you can see, I turned the pitch black ship into something a bit of a brown to give some color, and then I picked the green from the sea and I applied it to give it a more distinct hue. And now I'm drawing some birds in the sky to give an idea of leading lines. Now leading lines, you may know for composition, are lines that draws your attention toward a certain area, and the birds are doing that. I'm gonna make them point a bit towards the scene, and I'm gonna add some glow to give an idea that there's a strong light source. I'm gonna add the glow on the tree as well and the island. I'm trying to process texture right directly off of the image that I use as reference. For the tree now, the bark, try different blending modes to see which fits the bill the best. Now, as you can see, I'm creating a duplicate of the whole scene, and I'm going to be applying a technique called chromatic aberration. I might make a new video. I'm definitely going to make a new a separate video on this. I'll show you how to create chromatic aberration to make your scene look more alive, a bit more balanced and more realistic. And it gives a sense of depth, like more of a 3D space. It brings the whole thing together beautifully. It's like magic. So basically what I'm doing is, from effects, I'm switching off certain channels, the RGB channels. I'm separating them from each other to split the scene into different channels of colors, and I'm going to displace them slightly. I'm erasing some of the channels from the foreground to create a bit of a blur, because I intend on keeping the foreground tree a bit blurry. So adding some highlights on the ship and some glow as well. Now the next thing I'm going to do is duplicate the whole thing, the whole scene that we have, and apply some noise. I love applying noise on a composition when I feel like it's finished. It just looks good. It adds some texture on top. Finally, I feel like the scene needs some reflection, a reflection of the mountain, the brighter area. It's just calling for it. So I'm going to paint some reflection on the water, and I'm going to add some secondary colors to make it more vibrant. And finally, I'm going to apply some motion blur, and I'm going to morph it with the warp tool. I'm going to adjust the opacity until I feel like it looks right, not too dark. I'm going to erase certain areas from the sides, and yeah, that's it. Now what I'm doing right now is I'm smudging some of the areas on the background, the mountains that can have cloud, to give the illusion that yeah, those areas can be covered in mist or fog. Finally, I'm going to create some lens blur for the foreground. I want the foreground tree to not be too sharp, so I'm gonna make it a little bit blurry right now. Again, this is another compositional tool to guide your attention away from a particular area, to blur it. If you blur a certain area, your eyes tend not to look towards it. It tends to look towards areas that are sharper. So I'm gonna erase the background that I want to be sharper than the foreground. I'm erasing it. This whole thing is like a pre-concept art. It's very rough and there's no clear process. I'm going back and forth mostly. If you enjoy watching my videos and want me to keep bringing you more cool content, then you can always support me by buying me a coffee. So until next time, peace.